I'll do a quick intro and I will let Kristin intro and then we'll kick it off. So I am Jenny Fotia. I'm head of our digital workplace products for the Coca Cola Company. My team leads all the different products and experiences across our digital workplace to enable employees. So Yammer is one of many things, and I'll talk about that shortly. And I have Kristin here with me today, so let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. So excited to be here. I'm Kristin Kopp. I lead digital workplace communications globally for Coca-Cola and had the pleasure of working with Jenny on our Yammer launch. So excited to share some of our experiences and learnings with all of you today.
All right, so I'm going to jump right in. Ground us in our digital workplace mission. So about 3 years ago is really when we started going after our digital workplace from the employee perspective at the Coca Cola Company. We have a pretty simple and focused mission, maybe not that different from a lot of you guys, but we're really focused on a user-centric and connected employee experience. We want to make sure that this digital world is just easy for people to navigate, easy to connect and get things done. So what we've done is created a workplace ecosystem that leverages a lot of tools and experiences for collaboration and communications. We've really made it a network of tools and things that come together in a seamless way with the employee at the center. So everything we do, we put the employee first. Everything we design, we always ask ourselves, how is this making our employees' lives a lot better or simpler or easier to get things done? And a key part of that is Yammer. And so we're excited to talk to you a lot about that today. But Yammer is really what connects us together across our company. It was a tool that we got in place in a really timely manner. Right before things happened with the pandemic. Some people would think we had planned that, but we really happened to get it launched. I think it was about 2 weeks before we ended up having to be remote. And it was really, Kristin will talk about how some of that came to life, but it's really helped us build our connected network around the company. So we're able to connect with people that you never knew you even could connect with around the world. So Yammer is at the heart of that for us. And we've had huge adoption and engagement across our network. We have 75% of our users that are adopted and on the network, which is huge. It's been real, and there's some key things that we've done to get us there, and Kristin will get into that. In the course of the last almost 2 years, I guess it's about a year and 9 months at this point, we've had over 88,000 posts, almost 900, we might be up to 900,000 reactions now, given when I pulled this data, we probably are over 900,000. We have a ton of engagement and really people leaning into how do I connect and engage. We're changing the way we do things so that people are using this to have more of those two-way conversations. It's not so much of us just putting information out into hoping people found it, right? So we're using Yammer to really drive a lot of those conversations, which has been foundational for us. So I'm going to hand it over to Kristin to talk through how we launched it and share a little bit more about that stuff.
Thanks, Jenny. We launched Yammer with 4 use cases in mind, and these should look pretty familiar as these are the ones that Microsoft suggests are the sweet spot for Yammer, and indeed we have found that to be true. I wanted to speak for a minute about leadership connection and some of the ways that we're doing that a little bit differently. Frequently, when you see that mentioned by Microsoft, they'll show an example of the CEO community. And we took that a little bit in a different direction and have our senior leaders embedded in some of the communities they might naturally be a part of. So for example, our Chief Financial Officer would be part of our global finance community, and our Chief People Officer would be part of our global people function community. And this just allows them to naturally be part of their conversations and things that they want to say, along with a lot of other dialogue that might be happening, and takes the pressure off of them having to carry a conversation by themselves in a community that's really dedicated to them. So we've just kind of taken a different approach. So something to think about to increase leader participation and kind of connect the dots between other conversations as well. I also wanted to share an example that came up for us during the pandemic around the crowdsourcing use case. So we, during the pandemic, had to move from a legacy solution to OneDrive. We were all virtual during this time, and so had to figure out how we were going to do this in a different way. And we really used Yammer as the cornerstone of connecting people around the world to our messages and our campaign. So a few things to highlight about how we did this. We started with some pinned resources, as you can see on the right rail. So things like LinkedIn Learning playlists, where we were able to curate some of the basics for people from some different lenses. So how to use it on a Mac, how to use it on Windows computers, iOS, lots of different things that people might be interested in. We were able to put some of our migration information, FAQs, things like that for people's reference. But then we really also were able to use it for a very extensive Yammer campaign that spanned over several months and phases throughout the migration. So in the beginning, we were launching the idea that this would be happening at the company and talking a lot about migration and things like that, timelines, what to expect. And as we got closer to actually moving to OneDrive, we were able to shift our focus to more sound bites of information around the learnings, how to use it, and things like that. So lots of tips and tricks. And we were also able to field a lot of user questions. So as you imagine, file management is really important to every single employee at our company. And so there were lots of questions, and we were able to not only leverage that content that we had published, those tips and tricks to answer questions, but really have a central place that everybody could come and learn and ask those questions and get a rapid response from us. We also took the opportunity to lean into Yammer live events and did our first global training session to introduce everyone to the features and functionalities of OneDrive and talk again about that migration timeline that was important for everyone to understand. So another way that we were able to engage with users in a more live and interactive way and leverage the power of Yammer, bringing all of those different pieces together. And as Jenny said, we were so fortunate to get our tool launched right before the pandemic. And so like many of you, we had to adapt a lot of things that we would have done in person to a digital and virtual format. So just wanted to share a couple of examples of things that came up during this time for us. So the first example you'll see was one of our business units historically had done a talent show and did a great job of bringing that to life in a virtual way. So they were able to allow the performers to post their segments. People were able to celebrate all of that talent, react and respond, and really support those performers and vote on winners for that contest. So a super creative way that people were able to maintain employee engagement and feel connected as a community in that business unit. Around this time last year, we also had to reimagine what we would do to celebrate the holidays. Again, an activity that people normally do in person. So we had a virtual global holiday concert for all of our employees with several watch parties that happened, live with commentary from people around the world. So people were able to engage and share those moments together. And then it was also available for asynchronous viewing between those watch parties for a period of time. We also have moved all of our significant town hall events to Yammer live events. So whether it's a global town hall, one of our functions, one of our regions getting together, or even teams underneath that, most people are using that format. And we've seen great engagement both live and with asynchronous viewing. And it allows us to really capture all of those questions and those recordings in one place. And finally, similar to the example that I shared earlier, we also tried to lean in and model some of this behavior for others using our own digital workplace tools. So each month we would pick a topic in the digital workplace that we thought people wanted to know more about. And we would do a month-long Yammer campaign with several posts a week about that particular topic, providing different sound bites and tips and tricks along the way, and culminated that in a learning session using Yammer live events. So here's just an example of the program that we called Digital Hacks. We also use the topic feature in Yammer to connect all of those posts together into that series. So that was a really powerful way to then be able to share that with people as a set of posts. And then finally, what have we learned along the way? A ton, like many of you have said. One of the things that we found to be really important and helpful when we thought about our launch was to put in place a starting macro framework, as I like to refer to it. We worked with all of our communication partners around the world to define a common set of global, functional, and regional communities that people could be added to before the launch, where we could get a few posts going so that when people came into the tool, they would see what is happening, how it works, and they would feel a part of some communities right away. We also worked with a lot of groups that had established memberships, things like communities of practice, affinity networks, and migrated all of them into Yammer as well. And so that's just a recommendation, is to think about that. So then what's left is more of that organic group creation for users once they join the platform. Another thing we found really helpful was we put together a very extensive communication toolkit that could be used around the world very easily. And we started with the Microsoft engagement toolkit and made it our own, adding custom branding. There was a set of emails, there was digital signage, posters, Yammer posts, infographics, you name it, it was probably in there. And I know that they really found that helpful, and it allowed us to be very consistent and fast in our messaging. We also shared tips and tricks on how to think about events locally. We were in the office at that time, so people were able to celebrate in person. The next thing that we found really helpful was to have a governance model in place and to think about that ahead of time. One of our learnings from our pilot was that as soon as you turn it on, everybody wants to create a group, but nobody really has a plan or really knows what they're going to do with it. And so then quickly you find yourself wondering if all of these groups are going to continue forward. So we tried to do training with all of our community owners ahead of time, and part of that was letting them know that we would be making sure that our groups were healthy and thriving. And if there wasn't activity in that group for 30 or 60 days, we would be following up, asking if they needed help, if that was going forward, or if that just should be deleted. Because times change and communities aren't necessarily meant to be there forever. So we just need to make sure, we like to make sure that we are pruning and kind of making sure that what employees experience is active and thriving. The next point I wanted to touch on was thinking about how the introduction of Yammer really shifts what you're doing before you had Yammer as far as your internal communication approach, and working with that team to really think about what the place of Yammer is relative to some of the other tools and channels that you have. Another thing that we found very helpful was the introduction of the Yammer Communities app for Teams. We didn't have that at launch, but as soon as that option was available, we immediately made that the default for all of our users. And this has really allowed messaging to be more centralized, pulling all of those Yammer announcements into people's Teams activity feed. And so if that's not something that you're doing, that might be something to consider in your organization as well. We have found that really helps people maintain Teams as their hub for working, if that's something you're using at your organization. And then finally, probably the most interesting thing we learned along the way was Yammer is a highly visual platform. And with the launch comes all of this fabulous media and videos, and everything looks really great, and everyone wants to be able to do that too. But not everyone is really highly skilled in video production and creating graphics. And so making sure that you have a variety of tools in your approved tool portfolio to support all kinds of people who want to participate and have great visuals with their messaging. So making sure you have some tools for the everyman who may not be a professional in that area. So that was some of the learnings that we found. Back to you, Jenny.
Okay, so hopefully you guys learned a little bit of new information there about what we've done, what we've seen along the way, some great use cases we never knew were going to come about, right, because of the pandemic, and turned that into what we could from a positive experience. So what's next for us with Yammer? All right, the journey with Yammer never ends. That's something else that we've learned. So an extra lesson learned there. You have to continue to think how you're going to grow and engage with the platform. It's never a journey that's done. So the next things that we have coming is really using Yammer to power knowledge sharing. So if you think about more than just conversations and connections, how we can connect people to share and distribute knowledge around the company, stop the duplication of work, that kind of thing. We are building an experience ourselves to power knowledge communities, and Yammer will be a backbone of that, along with SharePoint and some other tools. So we're really excited about that. And that's going to lend us to also connect people with subject matter experts and key topics. Some things that Microsoft has will certainly play into that. But we have, I'm sure like a lot of you do, where people struggle to find the answer to a question, or they're trying to find an expert. So we're really going to lean into some things that, like Kristin talked about with our hashtag campaigns and different things like that within Yammer, to really connect people to find those experts as quickly as they can through these knowledge communities that we're building. And ultimately, our goal is to unlock the value of our networked way of working. So as the world changes and we are in this hybrid world, and as we're trying to get more efficient and productive in the way we work, we're really empowering our employees to work in a networked way. Don't, work in silos, don't work just within your team, but how do we span our network to be as big and as useful as it can be? And we really think Yammer is going to enable us to do that. So we're excited about what's going to come and what we have planned for the next year, 2-3 years with Yammer. So maybe we'll share more next time. And that's all we got. I think we're headed over to questions.